Hey, good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rick Childers, the District Commander for Walla Walla District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Uh, and I want to start by thanking our stakeholders. Several are, here with us today, and others are watching remotely. But I'd like to recognize key stakeholders at the state and local level, including the Office of Idaho Emergency Management, Canyon-Ada County Emergency Management, the mayor from Garden City, Idaho Department of Water Resources, and Seattle City Light. I'd also like to thank the support of Governor Little's office, members of our congressional staffs from the state of Idaho, federal partners from the Bureau of Reclamation, and the various media outlets who have joined us. I would also like to let everybody know that our discussion today is going to be live streamed on YouTube Live, and that is for the benefit of anybody in the public who's able to join us here today. And I want you to know that the video is going to remain posted for people to watch at a later time if they weren't able to be here with us today. And if you are joining us from YouTube Live, I invite you to provide your comments or questions to the email address that's listed in the discussion, and we'll certainly get back to you and look forward to speaking with you more. Today, we're going to talk about three main things. First, we're going to talk about a change in the overall risk classification to Lucky Peak Dam and what that means. Next, we're going to discuss river flooding and the water management activities that we are doing alongside of our local and state partners to mitigate that risk to the Treasure Valley. And last, we're going to talk about the release of flood inundation maps on the National Inventory of Dams. So first, we're going to talk about the results of our most recent periodic assessment. And for those of you who don't know, that's a routine evaluation that the Corps performs on the dams that we own and operate. We do this every 10 years. And of specific interest is the resulting change in risk classification for Lucky Peak Dam and what that means for Treasure Valley. On risk management, we want to kind of frame that discussion. So across the nation, there are many dams, several built around the same time frame that could be coming due for significant capital investment to extend their service life. When you consider resource limitations like money, time, the skilled experts to analyze and design the necessary improvements, dam safety professionals across both the public and private sector have taken to using risk-informed decision-making to guide the prioritization decisions that are necessary to make sure that these resources go towards the most urgent and compelling needs for public safety. And the Corps is certainly no exception. That is fully embodied in the message we're here to talk about today. The risk classification. Inside of the Corps, we refer to that as a dam safety action classification, consists of two parts: the risk of dam failure and the consequence of that failure should it occur. In this equation, it's important to know that the risk of dam failure remains very low. There has been no change in the structural integrity to Lucky Peak Dam. There is no significant danger that caused the risk classification to change. Instead, it's our ability to predict the consequence is what's changed. So the population in the Treasure Valley, it's long been a population center, and certainly the population has increased since the dam was built. The most significant change is, in the last 10 years, is the Corps' ability to model and predict the consequence of that change. And that is the primary reason that Lucky Peak's risk classification has changed from a moderate to a high. And what's the so what of this? Where are we going? The change in risk classification will help the Walla Walla District compete for and secure the funding necessary to complete what's known as a issue evaluation study. Now, this is a 12 to 18-month study that is going to make recommendations on ways to mitigate every one of the risks that were identified in this periodic assessment. And some of those risks and the mitigations thereof could be within the federal authority, like, for example, if there were a change to the dam, and some of the mitigations may not be within the federal authority. It would be something that we would work with our partners at the state and local level on, for example, maybe an early warning system or something like that. And throughout this issue evaluation study, we're going to work very closely with our partners here in the Boise area to make sure that we're communicating throughout. Second, separate and not related to the periodic assessment, we want to differentiate what has not changed in terms of water management. And that is that river flooding, as a result of the common storms that we may reasonably expect to see year over year, remains the biggest risk to the Treasure Valley. It's very important that everybody understands that we may see flooding, even significant flooding, when Lucky Peak Dam functions perfectly and as designed. Flood risk management, it's a shared responsibility. So we want to make sure that we take the time today to touch on the strong and longstanding relationships that we have as the Corps with our local, state, and federal partners. We want to talk about some of the efforts to mitigate flood risk that have been done in the recent years and that we look forward to doing. And the purpose of that is we want you to know that we take this seriously and we are putting a lot of effort into what we identify as the most likely risk. A couple examples include in 2015, Corps water managers provided precise modeling of 15 of these smaller flood flows, like I spoke about before, to Flood Control District 10, the United States Geological Survey, and NOAA's National Weather Service. These helped inform flood prediction, and they also helped create the current mitigation plans that are in place here to help improve flood resiliency. In 2017, the Corps provided technical assistance to county emergency managers during the 101-day-long flood fight. Most notably, at Sunrock near Garden City, the Corps provided technical assistance to address a safety concern over the stability of water-filled gravel pits. This past year, Walla Walla partnered with Flood Control District 10 to provide a two-dimensional model of a 75-mile stretch of the Boise River. Now, this state-of-the-art model helps accurately predict what floodwaters will do, and it also helps manage other pressing concerns like gravel management, which here in the Boise Basin is a very big concern. And finally, I'm very excited to share that this coming year, the Corps will be beginning a flood risk reduction study with Garden City. And for those of you who are familiar, as recently as 2 years ago, the Corps used an authority that we have to do a significant amount of work on addressing what things can be done for mitigating flood risk. This effort will build on that and provide tangible alternatives that can be considered for future construction. So that's a very exciting opportunity. We will very much look forward to that. Third, and finally, we're going to talk about an updated tool that USACE is going to make available to our partners and the public as early as this month. We're updating the National Inventory of Dams, and many of you will know that is a database that the Corps maintains as directed by Congress of approximately 90,000 dams across the country. The purpose of making these inundation maps available to the public is to better describe and communicate the conditions of our dams and the risks that they pose to downstream communities. We are going to share both flood maps, flood maps and dam break inundation maps for the 740 dams that the Corps operates and owns across the country, so the public can better understand their risk. Now, before I turn over the microphone to Mr. Dwayne Weston, who is our Dam Safety Officer and Chief of Engineering and Construction, we'd like to show a short video produced by our Public Affairs Office that captures some of the things that we're going to go into greater detail about.
Flooding from the Boise River poses a risk to Treasure Valley residents. New risk assessment initiatives are underway at Lucky Peak Dam aimed at improving public safety. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, USACE, has some public safety initiatives concerning Lucky Peak Dam that we will be sharing with you in the coming months. There will be a new flood inundation mapping system that is going to be available later this fall. It will give you a clearer picture of your potential risk so you can take steps to increase your preparedness. In addition, we recently completed a periodic assessment of Lucky Peak Dam, a routine assessment that examines the risks and consequences of dam failure.
Lucky Peak Dam and Lake are located at the Boise River about 10 miles upstream from Boise, Idaho. The dam, owned and operated by the USA's Walla Walla District, provides flood risk management, irrigation, hydropower, and recreation. Since its construction, the dam is estimated to have prevented over $1 billion of flood damage. The rolled, earth-filled embankment is about 1,700 feet long from the crest, with a maximum height of 340 feet above the stream bed. The 600-foot-long concrete spillway on the left abutment allows water to flow over the crest to avoid overtopping the dam when the water reaches maximum storage elevation in the reservoir. The project includes 2 gated outlet tunnels and a hydroelectric power plant.
Every year, snowmelt runs off the surrounding mountains and flows into nearby creeks and streams and into the Boise River. The safety and health of Treasure Valley residents is our #1 priority, and we are actively engaging with state and local governments, first responders, and the community's emergency managers to address this continued flood risk. While we cannot completely eliminate risk, we can reduce it. The objective of the Corps' dam safety program is to make sure our dams deliver benefits while reducing risks to people, property, and the environment. Protecting life safety is our highest priority.
What do I need to know about dams? A dam is a large earthen embankment and/or solid concrete structure that is built across a river to temporarily hold back water from continuing flow downstream. Although dams provide many benefits, the primary benefit of most USAID dams is reducing flood risk to downstream communities. Without USAID dams, significant flooding would occur more often along the rivers where dams are located. Although USAID dams reduce the risk of flooding downstream, they cannot eliminate all flood risk.
What else should I know about Lucky Peak Dam? Several factors contribute to the risk associated with Lucky Peak Dam. These include a confined canyon downstream of the dam that concentrates flow and maintains flow depths until it discharges from the canyon. A large population center approximately 10 miles downstream of the dam where the river exits the canyon. And Lucky Peak Dam stores a relatively large amount of water. Living with flood risk reduction infrastructure such as dams and levees comes with risk. Know your risk. Please review the flood inundation mapping system when it becomes available later this year.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dwayne Weston, the Dam Safety Officer for the Walla Walla District. And here this morning, I'm here to introduce a couple of folks that are going to give you a little bit more information and more detail from what the commander was talking about. The first of which is Tracy Schwartz, who is our flood risk manager for the Walla Walla District. And he is going to talk to you today about the general flood risk here in the Treasure Valley. After him, there will be Marcus Palmer, the Chief of Design Branch for the Walla Walla District. And he will discuss in more detail the dam safety program that covers Lucky Peak and the recent periodic assessment. So, thank you.
Hello. So as Dwayne said, my name's Tracy Schwartz, and I'm the Walla Walla District Corps of Engineers Flood Risk Manager. So today, what I want to talk about is something that's not a new topic, but more of a review of the flood risk on the Boise River. Next slide. So upstream of the Treasure Valley, we have 3 large reservoirs. There's Lucky Peak Dam, which is owned by the Corps of Engineers, and then there's Arrow Rock and Anderson Ranch dams that are owned by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. We operate these 3 reservoirs collectively to suppress flood flows through the Treasure Valley. But despite these 3 large reservoirs, there is still flood risk that exists for the Treasure Valley. I'm going to talk about a couple of the risk factors that still remain. One is large runoff volumes. If we have a large amount of snowpack and precip that comes down and overwhelms the capacity of these reservoirs, the only option is to send that flood flow through the Treasure Valley. So large runoff volumes that exceed the capacity of these dams is the first factor. But then there's late season rainstorms. So we operate these dams for multiple purposes. We operate them for flood control, and then we also operate them for irrigation and recreation. So as we go through the spring runoff season, we mitigate the flood by absorbing the peaks into these reservoirs. But as we get to the end of the spring season, we fill the reservoirs for those other purposes, for irrigation and for recreation. If during that narrow window when the reservoirs are all full, we happen to get an unusually large rainstorm, we've increased the risk of flooding for the Treasure Valley. Then there's irrigation operations. Irrigation, particularly the New York Canal, takes a lot of flow out of the Boise River. That helps reduce flood flows through the Treasure Valley. But those irrigation operations cannot be relied on in every year. And the last factor I want to mention is the risk of dam failure. So for those who live around the Boise River, the biggest hazard that you face is the risk of a flood. So next slide. So on this slide, I want to talk about the increasing population in the floodplain. On the left-hand side of the slide, you see the area around the city of Eagle at the upstream end of Eagle Island. This photo was taken during the 1943 flood. This was before Lucky Peak Dam was constructed and the present day flood risk reduction operations of those reservoirs. In this photo, you see there was a fairly broad floodplain that largely covered farmland and area that was pasture land. Today, on the left-hand side, you see that that farmland and pasture land is now all development, where you've got people and homes, structures and infrastructure all in harm's way. So next slide. So even with the dam properly functioning, the Boise River continues to flood. Since 1982, the Glenwood gauge has been above flood stage 11 times. We define flood stage as 7,000 cubic feet per second, or CFS. The largest of these 11 events are shown on the slide. The biggest was 1983 with a flood flow of 9,800 CFS. But in 1983, development wasn't near what we have more recently. The most recent flood was 2017, where we had a flood flow of 9,500 CFS. These flows are much lower than what would have been seen without the dams. In fact, we've exceeded the big flood capacities of such as the 1% flood 43 times coming into the reservoirs, but we've been able to mitigate these down to the flood flows that are seen on the left. But there are still some bigger floods yet to occur. A commonly referred to large flood is the 1% chance flood or 100-year flood. That's a flood that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. With our 3 reservoirs, we're able to reduce that peak down to 16,000 CFS through the Treasure Valley. Another commonly referred to big flood is the 500-year flood or 0.2% chance flood, which we can reduce down to 34,000 CFS or roughly double the 1% flood. Now you notice these floods are much bigger than the ones we've seen in recent times. Well, they're rare floods. But even though they're rare, it's more likely that you would have one of these floods than a dam failure. So next slide. So what is being done to better understand and reduce flood risk in the Treasure Valley? Well, we've got hazard mitigation plans that are developed by the state and local governments. We have local emergency plans. And then information for the public. The Corps has worked on a project that has led to the National Weather Service Advanced Hydrologic Predictive Service webpage, commonly referred to as AHAPS. On this webpage, you can look up, and we've got 15 different flood maps with different associated flows. And it allows people to look on these and see what kind of flow would inundate different areas of the Treasure Valley. An example is shown on the right-hand side of the slide. This is a snapshot of the AHAPS webpage with the 500-year or 0.2% chance flow in the area just upstream of downtown Boise. Also, the Corps has worked with FEMA and the local communities in the development of updated flood insurance rate maps. We've also partnered with Flood Control District 10 and a variety of other stakeholders to develop a two-dimensional model that we just completed in the last 6 months. That model adds additional detail to the floodplain extents, and it was based on 2019 LIDAR data, which is relatively current for inundation modeling. The Corps has also been actively involved with Garden City on a flood risk reduction study, looking at alternatives to reduce the flood risk for the city of Garden City. And soon, we're going to be releasing new inundation maps through the Corps' National Inventory of Dams webpage. And these inundation maps show the flood extents associated with a dam break of Lucky Peak Dam. This is all accomplished through partnerships and shared responsibility between federal agencies, state agency, as well as the local communities. So next, we're going to have a short video that's going to show dam safety inspections, followed by a presentation by Marcus Palmer, our Chief of Design Branch.
Dam safety inspections are critical for documenting conditions and performance of dams. That is why we conduct daily, annual, and 5-year periodic inspections. The 8 dams of the Walla Walla District provide many authorized benefits to the community. The primary authorized purposes of these dams include hydropower, navigation, and flood risk management. The secondary purposes are recreation, water supply, fish, wildlife, and irrigation. These benefits are critical to the environmental sustainability, watershed management, and they are integral to communities.
The Walla Walla District boundaries and dams extend over 100,000 miles across 6 states in the Snake River Basin. Regular inspections are important for dam safety because they provide an opportunity to detect early signs of potential distresses. This allows us to implement early maintenance measures to ensure that the dam is operating as designed. Early detection of potential problems also ensures that we utilize limited available resources where they are needed most. After our inspections, we immediately share findings that need further evaluation with engineers. Engineers complete follow-up assessments and additional inspections as needed to document performance conditions and address potential deficiencies.
During inspections, the technical and engineering team look for change in conditions and different features of the dam, such as abutment groins, dam toe, dam crest, and gates in the intake tower. The inspection team also closely inspects areas of the dam that has experienced distresses or seepage.
Inspection findings are compared to documented historical conditions to evaluate performance.
If potential conditions are observed during the inspection, the team brainstorms to identify potential repair alternatives to address the deficiencies so that the dam can perform according to design.
Project staff conduct daily visual inspections of key features of the dam to establish baseline performance conditions. Comparing daily visual observation to documented historical performance is key to assessing changed conditions and their impact to dam stability.
Prior to the annual inspection, the engineering team reviews the operation and maintenance activities at the dam, which are needed to address documented deficiencies. This review gives project staff an opportunity to discuss challenges on pending repair work and to gather additional information during inspection to develop a robust solution.
Annual inspections are another opportunity for early detection of potential deficiencies and provide a window to address routine maintenance challenges faced by project staff. Periodic inspections are held every 5 years, and they involve detailed inspections of all dam features. These inspections last almost a week and involve analyzing all previous inspection findings to understand dam performance.
During periodic inspections, past inspection findings are evaluated to provide a comparison baseline. Findings from the periodic help to evaluate conditions and expected performance to understand the potential response of the dam to a range of pool loadings. Understanding the dam response helps us to identify potential risks and maintenance priorities for 700 dams across the country owned by the Corps of Engineers.
Life safety is our #1 priority, and we work hard daily to make sure that communities located upstream and downstream of our dams are safe. As a learning organization, we continually improve our dam safety practice by incorporating lessons learned from our inspections across the country and the world, and including those from our periodic trainings. Dam safety is a shared responsibility that involves collaborating with local emergency managers who ensure that community emergency preparedness plans are adequate to safeguard lives and properties during natural disasters. Our local emergency partners are our eyes on the ground and give the Corps of Engineers important feedback to better serve our communities. Your collaboration with your local emergency managers is instrumental in helping the Corps of Engineers reach its dam safety priority of life safety.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcus Palmer. I'm the Chief of Design Branch at the Walla Walla District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm here to talk about changes to the risk assessment at Lucky Peak. Bottom line is that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is changing the risk characterization from moderate to high. The condition of the dam hasn't changed, but our understanding of the consequences has changed. I'm going to start by giving a quick overview of the dam safety program and how the risk assessment works, what risk means specifically to dam safety, current dam safety actions associated with this risk classification, some of the next steps, and then I'll be discussing the new initiative of sharing Inundation Map. Next slide, please. So the USACE Dam Safety Program, it is designed to reduce risks through routine inspections and assessment of dams and their facilities. You can see a number of the activities here that we've discussed, that we've shown in the videos, and we'll be highlighting a few of these here. There are additional non-routine items that are not on the slide that we'll be talking about at the end. A robust dam safety program holds life safety paramount. It includes periodic assessments, which are a combination of a periodic inspection and risk assessment. The periodic assessment is the routine activity that triggered the change to the risk classification that we are here to discuss with you today. I'd like to highlight also emergency action planning and exercising. This is done with our partner agencies. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So what is risk? Risk is something that means different things to different people. Here in the context of dam safety, there are 3 elements that together define what the risk is for a given dam. There are hazards, performance, and consequences. This is a little bit different than how we define flood risk. The first 2 elements here combined give the likelihood of inundation. So hazards are things that put load on a dam. Common hazards are floodwater and earthquakes. The anticipated frequency and severity are important to the overall risk equation. In advanced risk assessments, there may be hydrologic or seismic studies conducted to better understand these hazards. Next slide, please. Performance. Performance is how well or poorly the dam manages the hazard. During a risk assessment, a cadre of experts explores how the subject dam performs down to its individual elements. We also look at the possibility of intervention to prevent poor performance. So we might look at the ability to flood fight at the dam for a given failure mode. During advanced risk assessments, there may be investigations or physical sampling done to better understand the dam's expected performance in addition to the additional study. Next slide, please. Consequence. This is the element that looks at where the floodwaters go and how it affects the downstream area. USACE prioritizes life safety above all else, but we do look at both the public safety element and economic consequences. Dam inundation mapping may be refined during studies to ensure that the consequence area is well understood. We also look at the evacuation effectiveness, critical infrastructure in the inundation area, any other mitigating factors. And again, this is the part of the risk equation that changed the most for Lucky Peak. Next slide. Risk assessments are all scaled depending on the level, type, rigor needed for a given study. All levels of risk assessment include modeling and analysis, expert opinions and elicitations, and always use the best available information. In the case of Lucky Peak, where the consequences are very important, mitigation likely will require coordination with our partners in local and state agencies. Next slide, please. So I discussed routine actions that we undertake with our dam safety program. A periodic assessment, again, includes a thorough on-site inspection, something we call a periodic inspection. This includes all major features. The second component of a periodic assessment is a risk assessment. The risk assessment includes all three elements that I discussed on the previous slides. And when you're complete, you get what's called a risk characterization. This periodic assessment increased our already high level of confidence that we understand the hazards and performance. We regularly fill this dam to normal high pool, so we have a very good understanding of how well the dam performs at this normal high pool condition. The dam is performing quite well, especially given its age. This periodic assessment gave us the opportunity to update and improve our understanding of the consequences from our initial screening level risk assessment that occurred 10 years ago. The updated models showed that the consequences are much higher than we previously understood. Next slide. So, our risk classification. This is used primarily to prioritize dam safety actions. The higher the risk classification, the higher the priority, both locally and nationally. All dams in the Corps of Engineers portfolio received a screening level risk assessment. Lucky Peak was in 2010. This program began in 2005. The risk classification is revisited during a periodic assessment every 10 years. The initial risk classification had Lucky Peak at a moderate risk level. It has been updated to high. Again, this is due to a better understanding of the consequences, better modeling that combines the inundation area with population and evacuation dynamics. The high consequences of Lucky Peak are due to the large volume water in the reservoir combined with the short distance to the population center and the geometry of the valley. The valley is somewhat narrow and confines the floodwater. Next slide, please. So what comes next? Having a higher risk classification triggers some action. Lucky Peak will be prioritized among the rest of the USACE portfolio. Now that it is high risk, the priority is higher for action. You can see that we've done two types of risk assessments. There are other types shown on the slide here. Each type, from top to bottom, has an increasing level of effort and detail. The next action is conducting the non-routine dam safety action called an issue evaluation study. We will be initiating that soon. These typically take around a year and a half once they begin. The issue evaluation study will look into all three parts of the risk equation. The recommendations for action may include a dam safety modification, may include other recommended actions to be taken in the consequence area, and we'll work with local and state partners if that is the case. In addition to the issue evaluation study, we will continue with an update of the emergency action plan, and we will also conduct an emergency exercise next year. The emergency action plan provides information for both dam operators and responding personnel to evaluate emergencies, take action, and notify affected agencies. Emergency action plans are coordinated routinely with local, state, and federal partner agencies. Next slide, please. Coincidentally, there's a new U.S. Army Corps of Engineers initiative that is occurring at the same time here. We're rolling out inundation maps available for public viewing on the National Inventory of Dams. These will be available in the next few months and will be available for all. There will be several scenarios that can be overlaid on aerial maps. These are meant to provide information for emergency managers, for first responders, and the general public. This is meant to allow prudent risk decisions by all. Next slide. Here's an example of an inundation map that will be posted on the National Inventory of Dams. This is a representation of the inundation area in the unlikely event of a dam breach at Normal High Pool. Normal High Pool, as I mentioned earlier, is basically full, and this occurs in most years. Dwayne Weston will follow me and will give a summation.
Hello again, Dwayne Weston, Dam Safety Officer for the Walla Walla District. And I'm going to review the key takeaways from the presentation. So, after the construction of Lucky Peak Dam, the likelihood of flooding in the Boise River has been reduced substantially, but not eliminated. The dam is well constructed and has been assessed that it is in great condition. The likelihood of failure is very low, but the downstream consequences, if the dam were to fail, are high. The recent changes in the dam safety action classification have went from moderate to high, and this will help prioritize this facility for further study over the next few years. And most importantly, USACE will continue to work with emergency managers and local communities to minimize the potential of these consequences and to maximize preparedness for the communities downstream. And I will now ask the commander of the Walla Walla District to come back up and conclude us today. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thanks everybody, and thank you, Dwayne. So, in conclusion, public safety remains our number one priority. This communication outreach is part of that commitment. In order to be transparent, we communicate in a frequent and consistent way, and we put things in context, and that is really what our time here together is about. While normal flooding poses a much larger risk to the Treasure Valley than any potential dam failure scenario does, we want our downstream partners, stakeholders, and residents to understand what the risk is. I'd also like to point out that as a result of our joint reservoir operations that we do collaboratively with the Bureau of Reclamation, Lucky Peak is estimated to have saved over $1 billion in flood damages over the past 66 years since it was completed. And that is a record that we're very proud of. And it is built on a lot of strong partnerships and collaboration amongst, again, ourselves, the local, the state, and the other federal agencies. And it's a relationship that we very much want to grow and continue in the future to help Boise be as flood resilient as it can be. This concludes our presentation today. I want to thank everybody who took the time out to be here present, and those of you who are joined online. And again, I offer, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share with us, please send them to us at the email address in the description. For those of you here today and in the media outlets, we are going to have a short visit out to Lucky Peak Dam this afternoon, and we certainly welcome you out to get some video and talk more about the things that we've discussed here today. Again, thank you everybody for taking the time, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Now, folks, before